Syarifah Amran Sofia binti Syed Abdul Halim, matric number 1231994. Today, I will be presenting a brief review of an influential book entitled The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Sir Muhammad Iqbal. The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam is the collection of 7 philosophical lectures written by Sir Muhammad Iqbal, a respected Muslim thinker, philosopher and poet from British India. The book was first published in 1913 by Oxford University Press and remains one of the most influential works in modern Islamic thought. These lectures were originally presented at different universities in India, where Muhammad Iqbal aimed to encourage Muslims to rethink and renew their understanding of Islam in light of modern developments. In this book, Muhammad Iqbal argues that Islam is a dynamic and living religion that must be continuously understood through both reason and spiritual experience. He highlights the importance of concepts like ijtihad, the role of religious experience, and the relationship between faith and science. This review will explore the main ideas presented in the book, reflect on their relevance in today's context, and share some personal thoughts on Muhammad Iqbal's powerful vision of faith and intellectual renewal.
My name is Nurul Fatihah binti Muhammad Hisham, number matrix 1231950. The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Muhammad Iqbal is a profound philosophical work that seeks to awaken the Muslim world from intellectual stagnation. In the first 3 chapters of this book, the author presents a powerful argument for rethinking Islamic religious thought in a dynamic, rational, and spiritual manner. So there are several ideas emerged from these chapters. First and foremost, the author emphasized that religion experience is a valid source of knowledge. In the modern Western tradition, only empirical knowledge is considered valid and rational. However, the author rejected this view and argued that one's spiritual experience of God should not be considered illusory or purely subjective. According to him, this inner experience opens up a deeper dimension to the nature of existence and is the basis for the development of religion. It makes a religion a more comprehensive form of understanding reality, not only from the material or physical aspects, but also spiritual and transcendence. Secondly, the author strongly advocates for ijtihad or independent reasoning as a tool for reviving Islamic civilization. He believed that the downfall of Muslims was largely due to the neglect of ijtihad, which was replaced by the blind imitation. In the early history of Islam, the tradition of ijtihad flourished and made a Muslim the pioneers of knowledge and thought. However, when the door ijtihad was considered closed, Muslims began to experience intellectual decline. The author called for Muslims to reopen the space for ijtihad to allow Islamic law and principles to be adapted to current realities without abounding the fundamental values of the religion. Thirdly, the author discusses the revelation as an objective and transformative reality. Revelation in Islam, he said, is not just a personal mystical experience, but a form of supreme consciousness that shapes history and society. The revelation received by Prophet Muhammad SAW built the social and political structure and brought about comprehensive change in the ignorant Arab society. Therefore, revelation should be seen as a force that moves civilization, not just a personal religious message detached from the reality of the world. Next, the author also presented the concept of God, who is personal and active in human life, in contrast to current Western philosophies that portray God as a distant power and not directly involved in the life of the world. The author emphasized that God in Islam is close, alive, and responsive to human efforts. This concept makes human relationship with God dynamic and meaningful. It also inspires humans to act, create, and assume responsibility as caliph on the earth.
On the other hand, the author explains the role of prayer as a form of soul and social strength. Prayer is not just a ritual act of worship, but a process of profound spiritual education. It develops discipline, moral awareness, and inner strength that make individuals more integrated, More than that, prayer also creates values of unity and equality in society when all Muslims, regardless of rank or background, stand in the same role facing God. The author sees prayer as a spiritual exercise that unites the individual and social elements of religious life.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. My name is Anis Akila binti Muhammad Aminuddin. My metric number is 1231951. So, I will continue the 10th item, and I will only briefly speak or explain about the 4 item here. So, the first one is the Quranic vision of human responsibility and individuality. Firstly, in the Quran in Surah Taha, verses 122, tells us that man is chosen by God. This means it elevates the human being with a special status. Second, in Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-An'am, man is described as a vicegerent or Khalifah, meaning humans are given authority and moral responsibility to act on earth on behalf of the Creator. Lastly, in Surah Al-Ahzab verses 72, it explains that man accepted the trust, that means amanah, that even the heavens and earth refused. This trust refers to free will and moral accountability. In short, man's individuality in the Quran is rooted in divine choice, leadership duty, and the freedom to choose, making every human responsible before God. Second, the unique reality and structure of the ego. So according to the author, the ego is not an illusion even if logic struggles to define it. Our experience confirms its reality. The ego longs for higher unity even though it's often broken or distracted. It differs from physical things. Its thoughts and feelings are deeply interconnected, not spread like machine parts. The ego is also non-spatial. It can dream or imagine while in one place. It experiences time subjectively in a way only that self can live. Importantly, each ego is private and unique. You cannot share or substitute someone else's selfhood. All mental states within it influence each other, forming a unified self. This shows the ego is a complex, evolving reality essential to consciousness, freedom, and spiritual development. And third, about the ego in relation to the Quran. The author sees the ego not as a fixed substance but as a directive involving self. First, based on Surah Al-Isra, verses 85, the soul comes from the God's amr, meaning command, not just physical creation. This implies that the ego is a divine energy with purposeful direction. Second, the ego develops through experience. It is not static. It grows stronger through choices, reflection, and moral struggle. Third, in Surah Al-Isra verses 84, shows that each person acts according to their own path, highlighting the ego's freedom and accountability. Next, the Quran teaches that both body, khalq, and ego belong to God, meaning they are part of the same system, rejecting the Western dualism of body and soul. Fifth, in Surah Al-Mu'minun verses 12 to 14, the new creation refers to the ego emerging from physical development, a higher order of self. And finally, the author explains that although the ego begins in a weak state, it can grow to transcend the physical, reflecting its role as Khalifah, God's vicegerent on earth. And lastly, the Quranic philosophy of history is built on 2 key ideas. First, the unity of human origin. All humans come from one soul. Unlike mere theory, Islamic civilization put this into practice, creating a sense of real social unity. Second, the Quran views time as a creative, continuous movement, not something static or repetitive. History is an evolving process, just as Ibn Khaldun described, life moves forward with purpose and change. Together, these 2 concepts shape a dynamic, inclusive view of humanity and history. That's all from me. Thank you.
Lastly, in the Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Sir Muhammad Iqbal discussed several reasons behind the intellectual stagnation in Islamic law. Firstly, he explains that ijtihad or independent reasoning is still possible in theory, but very rarely practiced. This is because strict conditions and the early formation of legal schools have made it almost impossible for one individual to perform complete ijtihad today. Secondly, he responds to claims made by some European scholars who blame the Ottoman Turks for this stagnation. He disagrees, stating that the legal schools had already become fixed before Turkish influence, so the problem is deeper than just political control. Lastly, Muhammad Iqbal highlights the historical conflict between rationalist and conservative scholars. A famous example is the debate over whether the Quran is eternal. Rationalists denied it to avoid similarities with Christians' belief, while conservative, especially under the Abbasids, supported its eternity to protect Orthodox. He believes that to move forward, Muslims must revive ijtihad and approach Islamic law with both reasons and faith.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nur Alia Natasha binti Musakar. My metric number is 1231960. So in this part, I will explain the four main methodology used in this book, which are qualitative, philosophical, textual and interpretive, and synthetic methods. So the first one is qualitative methodology. So this book uses a qualitative approach by focusing on the analysis of religious concepts and ideas rather than statistics or data. Iqbal explored topics such as the nature of faith, spiritual experience, the human self-study, and the relationship between man and God. So through deep reflection and theoretical discussion, he invites reader to think critically about religion. This approach allows Iqbal to explain complex spiritual and moral issues in a thoughtful and meaningful way. And next, the second methodology. Iqbal used a philosophical methodology by applying logic and critical thinking to reinterpret key Islamic beliefs. He draws on both Islamic philosophers like Al-Ghazali and Ibn Sina and Western thinkers such as Kant and Bergson. His aim is to bridge reason and spirituality, showing that Islam is intellectually sound and relevant in the modern world. So this method helped make Islamic teaching more relatable and rational for contemporary readers. So the third methodology is Iqbal used a textual and interpretive methodology. So the author used a textual and interpretive approach by analyzing verses from the Quran in a symbolic and contextual way. He goes beyond literal meanings to explore deeper message related to concepts like God, prayer, the ego, and human freedom. So his interpretation are thoughtful and relevant in this modern issue, and then making the Quran feel alive and applicable in today's world. So in this method allows him to connect sacred text with philosophical reflection and real life experience. Alright, so the last methodology that used in this book is synthetic method. So Iqbal combined traditional Islamic thought with modern philosophical and scientific idea. Instead of he rejecting the past, he reinterprets it to suit the needs of the present and future. So he encouraged Muslims to think progressively while remaining grounded in their faith. This approach shows that Islam actually is not rigid or outdated, but a dynamic and adaptable religion capable of guiding humanity in every era. So I want to conclude that Muhammad Iqbal's words is actually a powerful call for Muslims to engage their minds, stay rooted in their faith, and embrace change with wisdom. So in his methodology show that Islam actually is not a rigid tradition, but a living and dynamic system that can guide us through modern challenge. So I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Next, I will explain about comment. The first chapter, this chapter offers a new understanding of the relationship between knowledge and religion experience. The author emphasizes that religion experience is not merely emotion and blind belief, but a valid and significant form of knowledge. This approach encourages us to view religion in a deeper and more holistic way, combining both reason and heart. I find this very relevant because we often fall into a mindset of religion that is slowly based on rules and dogma without truly embracing the spiritual experience. This chapter reminds me that strong faith comes from a combination of knowledge and deep personal experience. The second chapter, this chapter emphasizes that religion experience is not only something personal and emotional, but also something that can be examined and evaluated philosophically. The essay invites us not to fear questioning and analyzing spiritual experience using reason and logic. This is important so that our faith is not based solely on feeling, but also grounded in rationality with universal moral values. I believe this chapter creates space for dialogue between religion, science, and philosophy, ultimately strengthening our understanding religion in religious experience. The third chapter, this chapter offers a profound perspective on the concept of God and the true meaning of prayer in Islam. The actual emphasizes that God is not a distant or passive being, but one who is active and close to humanity. This approach demonstrates that prayer is not merely a ritual or a request, but a spiritual connection that fosters inner strength, self-awareness, and motivation to take action. Overall, this chapter reminds us that prayer is a process that revitalizes our faith and make our relationship with God more meaningful and dynamic in daily life.
Next, combining Islamic thought and modern philosophy. The author demonstrates an extraordinary ability to combine Islamic teaching derived from revelation with the approach of modern Western philosophy. He is not blindly anti-Western, but rather takes a critical and constructive approach. The author used the views of philosophical figures such as Nietzsche, Bergson, and William James to strengthen the argument while emphasizing that the foundation of Islamic thought remained based on the concept of monotheism. This approach opens up space for the renewal of Islamic thought that is not disconnected from the tradition but is open to the development of the times. From an academic point of view, this is seen as a major contribution to the discourse of modern Islamic philosophy that is contextual, creative, and not static. Furthermore, emphasis on dynamism, change, and reform. The author consistently emphasizes that Islam is a living and moving religion. Through concepts such as ego, which is the human self, and ijtihad, he upholds the values of freedom of thought and moral responsibility as the core of individual and societal development. He rejects the view that Muslims should continue to be born by taqlid, which is blindly following, and calls for Muslims to reactive ijtihad as an effort to understand and address current issues. From an academic perspective, this idea is very significant because it challenges traditional views that are too static and breathes new life into the development of knowledge and religious understanding that is fresher, more creative, and more in line with current realities. Lastly, a call for comprehensive reform in Muslim life. The author does not only talk about individual change but emphasizes the need for comprehensive reform in the social, political, and legal system of Muslims. He believes that the strength of Islam cannot be established if its followers rely solely on the legacy of the past without trying to understand and apply Islamic teaching in the context of the time. The author suggests that the institution of the modern Islamic State play an important role in reviving collective ijtihad. Academically, this is seen as an ambitious reformist view that is still relevant today, especially in the effort to rebuild the strength of the community through more systematic structural and policy change.
In conclusion, the Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Dr. Muhammad Iqbal is a deeply thought-provoking book that has given us a new perspective on the relationship between religion and reason. Through the 10 key points we've discussed, we were particularly struck by how Dr. Iqbal emphasized religious experience as a true source of knowledge, the need for ijtihad in reform, and the transformative role of prayer. What we personally found inspiring was how we merged Islamic thought with modern philosophy in a way that feels both relevant and empowering. The book challenges us to think critically, to embrace change, and to stay true to the dynamic spirit of Islam. Overall, this work is not just intellectually rich, it's also a reminder for us to be more reflective, spiritually aware, and proactive in our role as thinking Muslims.